This is the Capitol Rundown.
So it's a budget crunch time for schools. The Michigan legislature cannot bail out these school districts because it doesn't have $3.7 billion just lying around waiting to be spent.
I was putting what was called the de-icer on the B-25. It was all women. I mean, we didn't know we were Rosies. We were just riveters.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. Whether it's in Lansing or Washington, D.C., a lot happened in Michigan politics this past week. We're starting this morning with former President Donald Trump's comments on abortion bans happening in conservative states and the potential of a national ban should he become president. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Rashad Hudson has more.
Former President Donald Trump says abortion access should be left up to the states.
And whatever they decide must be the law of the land.
But Trump stopped short of calling for a national abortion ban, something many Republicans have pushed for.
This is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart or, in many cases, your religion.
Trump says he supports exceptions
for rape, incest, and life of the mother.
The Biden-Harris campaign was quick to seize on the moment.
We believe in a woman's decision and ability to make a decision.
Vice President Kamala Harris slammed Trump for saying he was proudly responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade.
If he were to be put back in a position where he could sign off on a law, he would sign off on a national abortion ban.
Democrats believe the fight over abortion rights will help them at the polls in November.
It's been on the minds of voters ever since Roe fell, as we saw in the elections in Virginia, in Ohio, and Kansas, and we will see this November.
Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan says Trump is out of touch on this issue.
He is starting to see that the chaos that he wrought by putting judges in place that overturned Roe is not popular with the American people and that they're going to vote accordingly.
Some Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, are calling on the former president to go further on his abortion stance. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Well, that wasn't the only abortion fight the former president was involved in this past week. The Arizona State Supreme Court cleared the way on Tuesday for enforcement of an 1864 law that criminalizes abortion throughout pregnancy. Mr. Trump says the Arizona court's decision goes too far and is calling on state lawmakers to change it, even as he defends the U.S. Supreme Court's 2022 ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade. Meanwhile, Michigan's Democratic governor reacted to the former president's stance on abortion. Through the Gretchen Whitmer Fight Like Hell PAC, the governor released a statement saying Mr. Trump is bad for women and reproductive freedom. She went on to say the former president says women should be punished for choosing abortion and people should take him at his word. Coming up next, a new bill in Congress is pushing for more online protections for kids and teens, and then why Congressman Tim Walberg faced heavy criticism for his comments at a town hall. That and much more when the Capitol Rundown returns. Welcome back. On Capitol Hill, Republican Congressman Tim Walberg of Michigan was one of a bipartisan group of lawmakers working on a bill to strengthen internet privacy laws concerning children and teenagers. Along with Democratic Representative Kathy Castor of Florida, Walberg introduced the bill on Tuesday. It modifies the existing Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act. A statement from the lawmakers says the bill would, quote, address the excessive collection and surveillance of youth, ban harmful targeted advertising, and prompt big tech platforms to provide young people and parents with the tools needed to navigate the online world, end quote. Well, this comes a week after Congressman Walberg was criticized in international press for invoking the atomic bombings of Japan when talking about the Israel-Hamas war. Walberg made those comments at a town hall meeting with constituents in March. He said the U.S. should not, quote, be spending a dime on humanitarian aid, referring to the Israel-Hamas war. He went on to say it should be like Nagasaki and Hiroshima, get it over quick, and the same should be with Ukraine. On March 31st, he walked those statements back. In a statement posted on social media, he said he was using a metaphor to say that Israel and Ukraine need to end their wars quickly and without putting U.S. troops in harm's way. And he went on to say the quicker these wars end, the fewer innocent lives will be caught in the crossfire. Coming up, congressional Democrats are pushing for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, including several from Michigan. But first, the Biden administration announced new drinking water standards, and that's something Michigan lawmakers have been fighting for. Those details next. Welcome back. The Environmental Protection Agency announced a new rule on Wednesday to limit some harmful chemicals in the nation's drinking water. The agency says the change will prevent thousands of deaths and reduce tens of thousands of serious illnesses. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Rashad Hudson has the details.
The water coming out of your tap could soon become a lot safer.
We want to make sure that all Americans are protected from their drinking water.
The Environmental Protection Agency announced the first ever national standard to limit toxic chemicals known as PFAS in public drinking systems.
We are going to reduce the exposure of PFAS.
PFAS has been linked to cancer, liver, and heart disease and development issues for infants and children. Mei Wu with the EPA says the new rule requires public drinking systems to monitor, reduce, and report high levels of the chemicals.
Nobody in America needs to worry about and should have to worry about whether or not when they turn on the tap, they can use it to make their coffee.
The EPA says it will provide nearly $1 billion in funding to help states and territories meet the new standards. Michigan Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee applauds the Biden administration for taking the step.
This standard acknowledges what we've known for years, that PFAS poses a grave threat to health.
Melanie Benish with the Environmental Working Group says this is a win for clean water advocates.
There could not be more important chemicals for the EPA to be tackling in drinking water.
But in a statement, West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Marcapito said, while everyone wants clean drinking water, the new rule will likely result in higher costs for ratepayers. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
New rules on PFAS contamination will be felt here in Michigan. Pentagon documents show at least 385 military bases nationwide are contaminated with PFAS, mostly from firefighting foam used during training, including the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Oscoda, Michigan. Over the years, PFAS contamination has also been found near Belmont, an Alpena military installation, Camp Grayling, and the Escanaba Defense Fuel Supply Point. Sandy Winselt of Belmont is a member of the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. She talked about the need to continue pushing to add more PFAS chemicals to the rule.
None of us are contaminated with just one simple PFAS. We are all contaminated with a mixture. And so I think starting to regulate these as a mixture or as a class is going to be the wave of the future and really is what is needed.
The PFAS issue in Michigan is one that Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin has talked about before. In January, she praised the Department of Defense for installing groundwater treatment systems at the former Oscoda base, and she welcomed this new EPA rule.
Water systems across the country will now be required to monitor for PFAS contamination and bring it down to safe standards, safe levels. This is one of the biggest victories we've scored in a decades-long effort to clean up PFAS contamination in our communities.
Well, last week, more than 30 House Democrats sent a letter to President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken urging them to reconsider the recent authorization of weapons to Israel, and that included representatives from Michigan. Days before they sent the letter, which included key Biden ally Nancy Pelosi's signature, 7 World Central Kitchen food aid workers were killed by an Israeli airstrike. It sparked international outrage and concern among top U.S. officials. The letter urged President Biden to withhold the transfer of weapons if Israel does not do enough to protect civilians in Gaza. And they also told the administration to stop sending weapons if the strike is found to have violated international law. The lawmakers from Michigan who signed the letter were Debbie Dingell of the 6th District, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan's 12th District, and Dan Kildee representing the 8th District. Well, coming up next here on the Capitol Rundown, our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubik talks about the education crisis possibly in the state's future and about Republicans possibly leaving an opening for victory for Democrats at the polls. The Capitol Rundown will be right back. Welcome back. The COVID-19 pandemic affected every student, teacher, and parent here in Michigan. As schools try to return to normal, though, more problems could be on the way. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubik explains why.
This report is correct. Michigan school districts around the state may be forced to send to the unemployment lines some 5,100 employees, including some teachers, due to a lack of federal funds to pay their salaries. The widely respected research firm Michigan Citizens Research Council has done the math, and unless some other ways are found to avoid the layoffs, local school boards will have some tough decisions to make in the fall. Here's the rub. During the peak of COVID, the federal government pumped $3.7 billion into Michigan schools. The problem is the schools have until the end of September to spend what money is left over, and after that, the one-time federal money is gone, never to be seen again. But the head of the School Board Association reassures parents that 5,100 classroom teachers will not be laid off.
Absolutely not. I would be shocked if it was even close to that.
Local school boards did use the federal money to pay for other so-called enrichment employees, and they could be at risk of losing their jobs this fall as well.
We've, brought in reading coaches, math coaches, to deal with the kind of mental health aspects of COVID. When we could find them, districts have brought in social workers, mental health providers, counselors. Those are positions, and some of those were temporary. So schools are already planning and knew that they would eventually bring them on and then lay them off.
He says that local schools don't have any way to raise the money to keep those people on board, and he knows that state lawmakers will not be sending that much money either. So layoffs are inevitable. But for parents and their children, the question is, how deep do those layoffs go? And at what cost to the quality of education students are now receiving?
Well, to get more on this story, the Rundown's Jorma Duran talked to Tim about the potential political fallout. Plus, they discussed a new tactic for Democrats in the upcoming elections.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skupik, to help us out. Tim, you just reported on looming school layoffs in Michigan. Now, if this makes life harder for kids and parents, will there be any political heat attached, and who will feel it the most?
Yeah, those are all good questions. Let's take a shot at this story. The Michigan Citizens Research Council has done a deep dive into the budgets for local school districts across the entire state of Michigan. So it's a budget crunch time for schools. The Michigan legislature cannot bail out these school districts because it doesn't have $3.7 billion just lying around waiting to be spent.
So who may get the brunt of the blame? Democrats, Republicans, or nobody?
Well, there's really no blame here. The federal money just ends, okay? And so you could blame the Congress for not extending the money, but there's really, from a political standpoint, I don't think there's a liability here, but more importantly, for parents and kids who are getting these enrichment programs that they desperately needed during COVID, it would be nice to keep those people on board. But my sources are telling me that some layoffs are inevitable. Most will not be in the classroom teachers, but from these ancillary services that they bought during COVID.
Well, let's turn to the election now. Many are saying Republicans here in Michigan and nationwide are handing Democrats a gift in the form of reproductive rights being restricted. Is that the case?
Well, we're about to find out. With the president's stance, former president's stance saying that he is not supporting a national ban on abortion or 15 weeks, he said, let's leave this up to the states. The Democrats think they've been handed a gift because here's the argument they will make. Mr. Trump, if you're right, and the states get to decide the abortion issue, there will be many people in many states, to wit, Arizona and Florida, where there will be what they call severe limits on abortion. In Florida, it's 6 weeks. In Arizona, the restrictions are universal. And the Democrats will use this issue. In fact, they're already running commercials with Mr. Biden, and they will soon have commercials with people that have been impacted by these states' rights issues, saying, you know what, this is cutting into our personal freedom. And remember, back in Michigan in 2020, the abortion issue to protect abortion rights drove a lot of people to the polls to vote on that, and then they stayed around long enough to vote for Democrats. Democrats have their fingers crossed that this will work again for them as they broaden the issue of reproductive rights for women.
Tim, always great to hear and see you. We appreciate the update.
Gentlemen, thank you. Coming up on the Capitol Rundown, we'll tell you who from Michigan was just on Capitol Hill to be honored for their World War II service. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A federal judge has rejected the lawsuit brought by Republican state lawmakers in Michigan challenging the new election laws approved by voters here in Michigan. 11 Republican lawmakers sued some of Michigan's top officers, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Attorney General Dana Nessel, and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. They claim these new voter-approved laws violate the Elections Clause of the U.S. Constitution by allowing for changes to the time, place, and manner of federal elections without input from the state legislature. The judge dismissed the lawsuit, agreeing with plaintiffs that the lawmakers did not have the legal standing to challenge these new laws. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson applauded the ruling, saying it would be anti-democratic to argue that voters are not allowed to influence the way elections are run. And finally this morning, the women behind the iconic World War II Rosie the Riveter campaign received a Congressional Gold Medal on Wednesday, including one from Holland, Michigan. During World War II, as men went off to war and left their jobs behind, women stepped in to do the work of churning out bombers, bullets, and anything else America needed. They came to collectively be called Rosie the Riveter. Sylvia Tannis of Holland was Rosie, and she was in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday to get a Congressional Gold Medal for her service to the country. The 98-year-old says it's a service she could do because she lied about her age to get a job at a Michigan Ford plant.
I was putting the what was called the de-icer on the B-25. It was all women. I mean, we didn't know we were Rosies. We were just riveters.
Other Rosies from Michigan were at the ceremony as well, including Barbara Essler, who was a Homefront child volunteer in Detroit, Virginia Rush, who worked at Republic Aircraft Products of Detroit, and Erlene Gaither, an aircraft mechanic at the Willow Run Bomber Plant in Ypsilanti. If you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletter. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We'll see you again right here next week.